let's take the planning objectives. What are the objectives behind this, this lecture on planning for an RCH program to be established at any level? Because this is generally a very important, interesting question for examiners, because this actually tests knowledge 3 in 1. It's testing your knowledge about planning and management. It's testing your knowledge about this national program. And it is also testing the knowledge about the third aspect, which is the planning cycle. Again, a part of management, but at least it shows that whether you know that or not. So first we'll begin with the objectives, because before starting anything, you need to have a clear idea in your mind as to what is the objective of setting it up. We all know we have limited resources. This is not a country of excess. No country in the world has so many resources that we can tackle all its problems. So we have to match those limited resources with the many problems that exist. And also we need to eliminate wasteful expenditure or duplication of expenditure. What is wasteful expenditures? Lots of wasteful expenditure goes on when you go into the hospital or you go in the community. There's a lot of wasteful expenditure which goes on, and there's a duplication sometimes of programs. So that duplication also leads to wastage. So for instance, if somebody is looking after let's say somebody is looking after sanitation, but does not know how that sanitation is having an effect on health, so you are just wasting money, because the diseases which are happening because of this waterborne problems, the sanitation people, the water supply people don't know that, and so they go on doing what they are doing. So this kind of expenditure can be an example of both wasteful and duplication. And based on this, what do? We develop the best course of action for fulfilling an objective. So that is what is the objective of actually taking this lecture. The program implementation, basically, these are the basic heads under which we prepare this plan. One is the action plan. Now, situation analysis. Action plan is obviously what action you plan to take. Action here is setting up this RCH program. For that, you cannot have a one-size-fits-all, so you will do an analysis of situation, which is what we call a community need assessment. And then following that, we have to provide services. So we schedule MCS sessions at least once every month in every village. And also you need to schedule home visits, so that has to be built into the program somewhere. Schedule catch-up rounds. Those catch-up rounds would be like we've done for so many diseases which we have managed to eliminate, like polio. We did a lot of work in that. And now the catch-up rounds for all kinds of vaccination, all diseases would be possible to schedule and would be useful. Then unless you brief the staff about what the program is and what are their responsibilities, it's highly unlikely that they will function. So for that, you have to train them. And for training, you need to mobilize the resources and cooperation of government departments, voluntary organizations, and community leaders, not just for training, but also for running the program. And you need to build it into the program. Very good example of this is the National Tuberculosis Elimination Program, where all these factors have been actually factored in. Then the information, education, communication, because unless you make people aware of what is on offer, they're not likely to avail these services. Managing the cold chain and other supplies. Many of you must have come here to MAMC for getting the COVID vaccine. I wonder if you really wondered how we were maintaining the cold chain, other supplies. This was not a routine immunization. This was adult vaccination, not even the childhood vaccines which we give. So I wonder how many of you actually tried to see how we are running it. If you haven't, please pay a visit and do ask the people who are running it. Then conduct sessions. If you are doing something haphazardly, the people will not be aware, the workers will not be really aware. So you cannot conduct sessions haphazardly. You need to really plan them. And after conducting sessions, you do want to do monitoring and supervision, because only then, after getting the feedback, can you actually go ahead. Then you need to see what impact is your program having. So you need to organize service coverage evaluation. And Again, if you have, like RCH, one of the major components is childhood immunization. So you need to do a disease surveillance to see what is the impact of whatever you've done. Now, this was just in a nutshell what all you need to put into this planning of RCH. So steps of actually planning this program would be plan formulation, then its execution obviously, and then its evaluation. So let's see the plan formulation for any national health planning. Now this is national health planning. Actually, we have a lecture on that, which unfortunately has been missed. So we'll take that health planning lecture. But it is basically, how do you plan for health? You have to define, in an orderly fashion, what is the community's needs. Community will have some felt needs. Of course, their needs which are, anticipated or according to the experts, what are their needs. But you also need to know what are their needs, So that is community need assessment. Because unless the community needs something and you provide it in the way they can accept it, the essence of primary healthcare is not fulfilled. And when the essence of primary healthcare is not fulfilled, that program cannot succeed. So if people are not taking the vaccine, not accepting it, it happened for a long time in polio. Eradication, elimination did not happen because of this fact that people were not willing to accept. Again, if you take this example of COVID, so much vaccine hesitancy in countries other than ours is leading to such breakthrough, such a grand scale of the infection continuing. So define the community need. That's the first thing. This is what you're going to dwell upon in depth now. Identify the unmet needs here. And I think in the family planning lecture also you must have been taught about this. Once you have identified the unmet needs and you know this is what the community needs by way of community need assessment, next step is obviously you want to survey the resources to meet them. Now, if you are in a developed country, even if a person is handicapped, disabled, but is in a developed country, the public health system over there would really be very, very helpful. Over here, even fully abled persons are unable to actually carry on day-to-day living. That depends a lot on how the health planning is done, how rich the country is, how well is your public health maintained. So you need to survey resources because you want to give everything, but everything will not be possible. So you have to prioritize. So that's the next step. Establish priority goals that are realistic and feasible. Now you want to immunize 100%, but it's not possible. So what priority goals can you establish? Something which is causing the maximum harm, you look at that disease first maybe. Something which is very easily eliminated, look at that. So that is establishing priority goals based on whatever fundamental principles of public health exist. And finally is projecting the administrative action to accomplish the purpose of the proposed program. That is for all national health programs. You just see that this is the action I want to take, but in order to actually take that action, you need to have the administrative section, the entire paraphernalia geared up to provide so that the end result or objective is fulfilled. And for that is a tough task. So now based on this only, whatever the background has been given, are we going to go ahead and we'll see planning RCH for a PHC area. Now, see, the third aspect, which is again completed with this, is not just the planning cycle from the management, but your knowledge of a PHC. So that is where this becomes a important kind of a question. So let's see the population covered by PHC, you all know is 30,000 and subcenters 6. So first you have to say that this is the population for which, with this infrastructure of subcenters, which you're going to utilize for planning this RCH service. Now, RCH in one of the lectures, rather than the first lecture, you must have been told that there is decentralized planning. Now, what does decentralized planning mean? Decentralized planning is when planning is done at a level where the population directly gets involved and it's not centralized. Now, family planning program got merged in this program, but that was a classic example of centralized planning going nowhere. Because earlier what used to happen, that targets for family planning were set in, let's say, the central government. And so somebody would set a target of, let's say that we want 80%, 60% sterilization, 80% IUCD. And our people, as you all know, are very smart. they would fulfill those targets twice over. How? Simply manipulating. A couple sterilized would be shown as two different entities. IUCD inserted, then just removed, but goes into the statistics as having been actually given. So it wasn't serving the purpose because the outcome was not happening. If you look at the outcome in a centralized planning, it doesn't happen because it is not involving people who are actually the real participants. So that is why this decentralization was done in RCH. And over here, the decentralization is to the level of the subcenter. Subcenter, why? Because that's a last bastion or post of the government. Beyond that, actually, it's not a pure government organization, organized program. It could be several other, like it could be NGOs, just be ASHA workers who are given, incentives based on the work. So it's not the regular kind of payroll government servants who are there. As I told you, we'll be doing the community need assessment in depth, because without that you can't plan a program. Just like you plan anything, you plan even if you plan your festival, you do the situation analysis, don't you? That what is it that interests, what kind of program should we have, how many people are there, what exactly are they going to like, where are we going to hold it. So basically for any planning, situation analysis is important. So let's start with now this is decentralized. Each subcenter, that means each subcenter with 6,000 population will have about 6 villages at least, because we assume that a village has about 1,000 population, though it's not strictly true for the entire country. In many villages, you'll just have a population, some tribal areas and all, you may just find 2 houses, 3 houses. In the hilly areas also, you may find very few homes, but we're not going to consider that variation. But let's assume there will be 6 villages in this subcenter. So what is the first thing you would like to see? The socio-economic status, the characteristics of that population. First is literacy. Now, why female literacy? Because if you're planning a program and there you have a population which has got high female literacy, it means the mother is going to be able to take better care of the child. So you can assume, lesser efforts have to be put in by you and better outcomes will be there. Examples are there in the state of Kerala and some other states where the female literacy is high, the IMR is low, fertility is low. So this gives you a clue, how much effort and what kind of effort you have to put in. Then the income. Why does income matter? Because again, income is very directly linked to nutrition. Income is very directly linked to healthcare seeking. Because if a person is a marginal farmer or a laborer, you do not expect them to spare time and miss their daily wages and actually come to the health center. This has been seen in lots of national health programs where flexi timings had to be introduced. So once you've seen these two things, the third part of the socioeconomic status, but we're taking it as separate, is occupation, because this plays a very great role when you're planning this program. What is the main occupation of that area? If the main occupation of that area is something where the mother is at risk and or she's not able to bring her children, she's a daily wage laborer, then you need to really devise some kind of a program where you are able to reach out rather than expecting them to come to you. So landless, that is why landless people become very important. If you have this population in your area, you will need to see that exactly, because marginal, again, they migrate in search of work. So you're given the first dose, and for the second dose, you're waiting, nobody turns up because you've all migrated somewhere to work. Then the artisans, farmers, migratory labor, all these occupations require special attention and care. So you need to record them first. So far as religion is concerned, as medicos, we are not concerned with the religion per se, but again, when you're running a program on a large scale, acceptability is very important. In polio, we did see that because of certain religious sentiments, people were unable to accept the vaccination. In COVID also, we've seen because of certain concerns, there was a lot of furor over the use of the vaccine. But therefore, what it simply means is that we have to take into consideration, if religion is forbidding or something, we have to take the religious leaders with us. Then another unique thing about India is the caste structure. Because caste structure again means certain people will be disadvantaged, or if you create an Anganwadi in a high caste area, the lower caste may not reach there. If it is in a lower caste area, the upper caste, despite being hungry, despite being malnourished, may not reach. So this, unless you plan it properly, this planning of RCH program is not going to give the yield which you are looking for. So far as tribals and nomads are concerned, they also have their own special problems. The tribals, because of their mobility, the nomads because of the mobility, sorry, and the tribals because they are prone to certain diseases because of the genetic issues, which you'll have to consider. And if you are not considering this, then again because suppose if, for example, in your area you have let's say 2 or 3 tribal hamlets. So if you're not considering them, they may not be accepting lots of things. They may be having a predisposition to certain problems, or they may be having certain rituals or certain norms associated with birth, child rearing, which you need to address. So you need to know this. So that is where this segment is important. Second component over here, which you need to see, is topography and weather and environmental sanitation. And if you're really planning a program properly and not just pushing the files, these points have a lot of relevance. Is it a plain structure? Is it a hilly structure? Now, supposing it's a plain, not much problem. Supposing it's a hilly structure, what happens on the hills? Most of the people are otherwise healthy, but in case of an emergency, transporting them becomes impossible. So if there is a population living uphill, then you have to make plans that maybe if there's a high risk pregnancy, you would have to maybe admit in advance, maybe admit a few days before, have some kind of transport available. So even if you run the best program, but you have no transport available for transporting a woman in obstructed labor from an uphill location to whatever center is located in the downhill area, your entire program is not going to benefit this particular place. And certain states have the entire hilly terrain. Similarly with rivers and streams, etc. Some of our rivers and some of our streams are still not, without bridges, still without bridges. People actually go in a boat or whatever way to cross. So imagine when there's a flood, the situation is going to be very tricky. And this happened in several years ago, before we had eliminated polio. Bill Gates, one of the richest men in the world, actually traveled in this kind of a boat, small boat. So he traveled across a river, I think it was a river in Bihar. It annoyed the authorities a lot because this gave negative kind of publicity, but that is what is the truth. So you need to actually look at these factors when you are planning the program, that if there is a river or there is a stream which tends to get flooded, how are you going to transport your patients? And now we have several mechanisms which exist in the primary health center, the untied funds and all, which can take care of certain transportation issues. But if you're not aware of them, then obviously nothing can happen. Then what kind of a weather is it? That area, is it drought prone? Is it flood prone? Again, both these conditions result in migration. So having a RCH program, planning it and thinking, I'm going to immunize 100% children or 100% pregnant mothers, I'm going to avoid all maternal mortality or child mortality, is not going to be possible unless you factored in for the fact that there may be a drought here, there may be a flood here, then the population will migrate and the population will have issues. So that is the weather. Now, after you've seen all these points, right? You've done the CNA about the population, you've seen the kind of area you are in. The next step is obviously, who are the beneficiaries of your program? For whom are you planning to have these services? Now, this is just a hypothetical one which I have made. We'll see how these calculations have come about. But if you enumerate, infants, this is birth rate of about 30 per thousand, which I've taken. India fortunately has a lower one now. So infants would be about 2.7% considering infant mortality, and pregnant would be 3% if the birth rate is 30 per thousand, but 1 to 1.5% at any time. That's because pregnancy, there's a wastage of about 25%, and there is also pregnancy lasts only 9 months and not 12 months. Lactating for 6 months, if we take roughly 2.4%. Children 9 months to 3 years, 8%. Less than 5 years, 13%. Reproductive age group women, 22%. Adolescent girls, 10%. Adolescent boys are not factored in because before the URSH clinic started, we really did not have any program specifically geared for them. So with these numbers, you know that if I have to provide a service, because obviously the package of services you will know, already from the 7 lectures that you've had, what is a package of services. So for that package of services, who are the beneficiaries, you'll have to enumerate, because all the services that you require, for example, immunization for these 2 groups, iron folic acid for this group and this group, right? Again, for these people, you need iron folic acid. So iron tablets for this group. So whatever has to be procured, you need to know the beneficiaries. Only after that can you work towards asking for supplies. So once you've enumerated the beneficiaries, the next step, now in our country, we do not have public health services or systems which are based on morbidity and mortality, though we should have. Because what we have a population-based system. For 30,000 population, create 1 PHC. But that is not really the way we should be doing, right? Because we do not know. Now, suppose it's a very rich area and they do not even visit the PHC. It's something like the BRT corridor which was made. Buses were given priority in an area where nobody travels by bus. Everybody was traveling by car and buses got a priority track. So ideally, what should we do is, this is the ideal way to plan, that we should see the major causes of morbidity and mortality so that you stock things accordingly. Now, for instance, how common are snake bites in Delhi? Hardly. So if we have a common kind of a essential medicine list for the entire country in the PHCs, we'll be stocking on some anti-snake venom, which is totally useless. You just have to throw it after some time. But if it's a northeast area, you definitely need to stock it. Over here, if you don't have the anti-rabies vaccine, looking at the number of stray dogs, our primary health care is going to suffer. So the major causes of morbidity and mortality, and how do we get this data? We are supposed to get this data. It's regularly generated. It's hardly generated. Mortality, we do have some idea because we do have SRS and our databases, other databases. But morbidity, we hardly get, much information. But if you do not have information, the best way is to collect it yourself. So you could just do a 1 month recce or maybe a week's this thing to see what kind of a morbidity pattern is there in that area where you plan your services. And in which group are we going to see the morbidity and mortality? Again, the beneficiaries. So infants and young children, maternal, RTIs, STIs, adolescents. RTIs, STIs mostly do not cause mortality directly, but the morbidity is huge and the quality of life suffers. Again, adolescent is not a group which is going to have much mortality per se, but morbidity of the kind which is now covered under the adolescent clinics, adolescent reproductive health services which we are providing. Mortality, but supposing you are in a high stress situation like Delhi, specifically when there are high competitive exams going on, there's a lot of mortality because of self-harm, suicides, and that happens very often in the adolescents. So maybe if you're setting up your services there, you may consider mental health also as one of the components. Or there's drug addiction in many parts of the country. So there you will have to have specifically program aligned to that need, because otherwise if you're just looking at maternal and child health and you're not caring, then the entire purpose would be defeated, because RCH does look at from cradle to grave. Next, we have to see the beliefs and cultural practices in relation to RCH. Now, why do we have to see this? If you remember your family health advisory program, I don't know how many of you have actually been through it. That folder does give you this component, beliefs and cultural practices in relation to RCH. So this is going to be very important because, when you provide a service to the community and the community is not willing to accept it because of its beliefs or its cultural practices, that service gets wasted. That is what the primary healthcare definition also says, that they are able to accept at a cost which is affordable and which they can accept. So there are so many beliefs and cultural practices which are associated with disease causation. Now, if people have a belief that a disease is caused because of some supernatural power, they're not likely to accept your services. Most important example in this would be the mental health care. In India, nobody believes they have a mental health issue. Everybody thinks that the disease causation, the mental health disease, is caused by some supernatural phenomena. So obviously they want to go to the various fakirs and all, and not to the proper doctors. So even if you set up the service, unless you advertise it, unless you really make people sensitized towards it, they're not going to accept it. Long time ago, people used to think that measles is good because it prevents smallpox, and measles vaccination was not very easily accepted. So then again, that paradigm had to shift by actually education and so many other efforts which were put in. Then the beliefs and cultural practices may interfere with health service utilization also. Prime example is all our vaccines, because you may be offering the vaccine free of cost, but the belief is such, the cultural practice is such, they do not want to accept it. And in RCH, another very important thing is institutional delivery. People always had that belief that if they were to deliver in an institution, somehow the prized male baby would be exchanged, or there would be some botching up, So women would not go to deliver in health institutions, or it was a belief that you needed your relatives or something, some familiar person, so you would not go to a health service. So that interfered a lot with actually controlling maternal mortality. So now let's come to the obstacles. The obstacles are misbeliefs, misinformation, and ill-founded fears. What are the misbeliefs? People can have a misbelief about anything. They may feel like there was a very strong observation in our area that despite giving so many iron tablets, women were still anemic. So we decided to actually do a qualitative study and see why it is happening. So what we found was very eye-opening. Many women said that they have constipation, the usual problems with iron tablets, or there was nausea, or there was heartburn, and some also said that they would have a dark child, so they were not taking. So that was an eye-opener for us, how to actually make them consume this useful drug for them. Misinformation is, in India, everybody is a doctor, unless proved otherwise. So all kinds of misinformation, and specifically related to childbirth and child rearing, there's a lot of misinformation which goes on. From generations, it has been passed on that if you eat a lot, you're going to have a big baby, and that is not going to have a normal delivery. So it's best to eat less, or there are some things which cause abortion. So that misinformation spreads, and even if you advise, they listen to you fine. Okay, you're telling them what to take and all that, but ultimately they'll do what they have been actually primed and culturally which is acceptable to them. Ill-founded fears, the ill-founded fears of many people have this ill-founded fear of allopathic medicines. Many doctors have also, I've met, who feel that a child should not be given strong medicine, which is antibiotics and all. So even when needed, you go in for other systems of medicine. So these are obstacles in actually running your program. Then the obstacles could be, as we already discussed, floods and migration of labor. And then another very important obstacle which is there in our country is the health worker, female is not resident. Even in our own village in Barwala, where we have a center, we used to feel very handicapped because the health worker female was not there. And so you told the women, you must call a trained attendant for your delivery, and the trained attendant was not there. That was the situation in most parts of the country. Now, USAID did come to the rescue with creating some living quarters for most of these health worker females. but it's still not all over the country. But we do have now some provision in the primary health care system also that would give some accommodation to the health worker, female, to reside in that area. Now, once you've done all this assessment, what is the next step? The next step is, as we already said, survey the resources. And what are resources? Resources are 3Ms: money, manpower, and material. Most important for health is manpower, because health is a labor intensive field. You may get a robot, but the doctor will have to manage that robot. You must have seen the surgery, LASIK surgery, which is done for refractive error correction. Even despite being computerized, you still need the doctor to actually run that machine, because you cannot have, some computer running it. Artificial intelligence can only play so much role. Especially in these grassroots programs, we do need manpower the most. So manpower, now again, you have to show your knowledge of a PHC. What is the manpower available? It's medical officer, health assistant male, female, health worker male, female from the sub-centers, other workers, government healthcare agency, private practitioners, NGOs, panchayats, Mahila mandals, NSS, all those would be present. So what would you like to see in them? What is their number and what is their training status? Training, even if you've just done your MBBS or you've done your MD also, that does not make you trained for a specific program. Every program needs a specific training, because your objectives are there for every program, which are different. And everybody has to be taught how to meet those objectives. What is the task they're supposed to do? Like for pulse polio immunization, we used to have training sessions. So even the chowkidar who stood at the gate had to be told that this is your role, because the importance of the program was the first thing we told them, that you're going to help eliminate this deadly disease which causes so much problem to children. So training for each program is based on the task that person is going to perform. So training for a doctor is going to be different, because the doctor is the decision maker. Training for a nurse is going to be different. So you need to, and there are modules specifically available for this program. So if there is no training done, you can train your staff. The logistics which you have to look at, how exactly who's going to do what, how you want to hold the session, where you want to hold the session. So those logistics will have to be looked at very carefully, because if something, in a community, if you make a misstep, take a misstep, it has long-standing consequences. In a hospital, people have a felt need. They come to you. So even if you are rude to them for a while, they'll tolerate it. They'll stand in the queue because it is a felt need. In community medicine, when we go to the person does not perceive it as his or her need. We have to explain to them that this is your need. We have to actually market our programs. And so logistics is very important. If you run short of some medicine, you run short of a vaccine, and you told everybody come here and get the vaccine. So the program is going to be not very popular. Status of the cold chain and other supplies. The cold chain, how do you manage it? How do you maintain it? Do you have ILR? How many times is the temperature check done? This status has to be seen. And other supplies like medicines, vaccines, everything has to be checked. Then the equipment. What kind of equipment would be required for RCH program? It would be very simple and basic equipment, weighing machines, blood pressure instruments. But when you visit our centers also, you will see that many things are missing or lacking. You may not have a child weighing scale, you may not have adult weighing scale, or it may not be functioning. The BP instrument may not be functioning, glucometers are not available, or if available, the strips are not there. So, in the chronic diseases as such, they have taken a big toll on everybody's personal incomes. So if the person is supposed to purchase these things and go ahead and test their own sugar and all, in the lower socioeconomic strata, it may not be possible. So equipment also, you need to check in the resources. So money, manpower. Money is not a problem here, because you're getting from the entire fund from the government. The package of services, as I told you, I assume you all know from that 7 classes, which is 14 hours of lectures already taken. So what you have to see is, how are you going to deliver this package of services? So for instance, let's recall a few. Immunization is one, adolescent health is other, STI RTI treatment, screening and treatment is another, intranatal, antenatal, postnatal services provision, all that has to be done. So how are you going to deliver these services, what we're going to see, and then supervision and evaluation. So for delivery, as we just saw in the beginning, the sessions have to be held, the immunization sessions. So you could hold these immunization sessions. Now, Wednesday is a common day for immunization everywhere. So you could hold this immunization sessions weekly, and this could be every Wednesday. You could hold it in the PHC. That would depend on how you have seen this situation analysis and planned it accordingly. Antenatal, then again, antenatal clinics have to be set up, family planning, those days have to be specifically delineated. So your population knows that if I go today, I am going to be able to avail this service. And then is a very important component of supervision and evaluation. So what is supervision? How it is done and why it is done? Supervision simply is, just observing what the worker is doing or looking at records. So supervision is just like trying to see whether the objectives have been met. Everybody is performing the task allotted and they are able to fulfill the objective ultimately. So you have to observe the worker doing work. That is the best way of supervision. Like in a factory, there's a supervisor and then they have workers. So, for a group of 3 or 4, they'll have a supervisor. The supervisor will actually see. Sometimes they end up being very tyrannical, but that's the best way of supervising basically. So if this is not possible, which is not so in our, in our healthcare system, it may not be possible for the medical officer to supervise so many workers. So the next thing is talk to the health worker. How does a talk help? Well, a talk helps because if you do not know what is wrong, you're likely to tell the truth. When people cook up data, when people cook up answers, it's because they know what is correct and they've not done the correct thing. So they'll say something wrong, and that is how you can understand. Like one of our teams went to a district in UP where the polio thing was not being controlled in the olden days. And there they asked a health worker, how do you give the vaccine? And since he did not know anything better, he told them very frankly that I'm injecting it. So imagine the oral polio was being actually injected. And then another worker actually took them to his washroom, and there he had stored all the vaccine vials in a tub full of water. So that kind of a thing you can only find out if you're actually talking to the health worker. And therefore you have to know what is the task they have to perform so that you can talk and find out where they're going wrong. The most common practice for supervision is reviewing records. So from the records, actually you can make out, unless they're really cooked up, that also you can make out. But otherwise, reviewing records, you can make out how the functioning is going on. So supposing it's a 60% immunization coverage only, your records show that this is a 60% immunization coverage. That means you need to go and see why it is so low. A very common time when we do take some action. Now, supposing you expect some antenatal women, a particular number registered, that how it is calculated, we'll just see. If it falls, more than 10% less in a small area, that means you need to ask your health worker female to redo the survey and see, go from house to house. That means the number is not correct unless the birth rate has fallen. Another thing is to meet the members of community and discuss. This is sometimes done, very commonly done in most of the national programs which have international kind of supervision and funding going on. So there, like in the National Tuberculosis Elimination Program, the team from WHO and World Bank and several other independent observers comes to an area. And they do not say who they are going to talk to. They just take a list of patients and they go and speak with them. And so they know the truth. And then there is a lot of reports which flow, every month, every small center, sub-center, month, the PHC, everybody is sending a monthly report. So if you just review those monthly reports, you can actually get information. Because there was once an incident where a person who was from this college only was actually working as a medical officer. And she narrated this incident that she got a monthly report prepared by the pharmacist. And the pharmacist told her, just sign it. She said, I just wanted to read it, so I read it. It was written 5 cases of neoplasia. So she said, but I haven't seen a single one. He says, oh, it is like this only. We just changed the figures a little bit. So imagine if this data travels all the way right up to the top, you're going to have 5 neoplasia from each PHC. Imagine the number of what it is going to do to the cancer cases in the country. So these monthly reports have to be prepared properly, and so you have to see that these monthly reports, whatever they are, what are they revealing, and then go and cross check. So why is it important? And what can you do? It's not why we all know why it is important to take action so that program can be improved. But what is the supervision required for? Let's say you want to see the activities of the health worker. You can look at the injection technique and antenatal care. The grips, just like you are examined in gynae, that if you know how many grips, how to assess the gestational age, injection technique is very important. Because in a community, if you're starting an immunization drive and there is a abscess, the whole program will go for a toss. So what you need to do in injection technique, you need to see, some people, some ANMs, they do not use the right kind of needle, the right bore of the needle, or the needle is not fitting, so the medicine is leaking, or it may be a rusty needle, or it may be a malfunctioning kind of needle, so it may cause an abscess or a wrong technique. So you need to really see, because in the hospital, as I told you, it may not be very, very important, but in a field setting, this is very important. Then if you want to assess the knowledge of mothers, a woman or a man who comes into the formal health system, you should never miss that opportunity of actually imparting whatever education is important. So for instance, if a mother has come for immunizing the child, she should be told and made to repeat, and it should be understood that she has understood when is the next dose due. The UNICEF used to do an evaluation of the pulse polio program, and so whenever the woman would exit, that kind of an exit interview was done by the supervisors. She was asked, when is the next dose going to be given? And if she had been briefed properly, she would know. Then referral for all the childhood ailments. Does she know the danger signs? Because it's a duty of the health worker to train the mother to understand that these are the danger signs, and therefore she has to go and seek care when one of those danger signs appears. You can check the logistics. Why? Because MCH cards, if the card is not there, the mother is not concerned. As such, if you give her a card, she's likely to lose it. But if you don't give it, she's not going to bother. But your records will not be there. Till we have the digital card for health for all, I think these cards, paper cards, will still be important. Syringes, needles, IFA, other drugs, whatever, you need to check the numbers. Record keeping, you can see, is the age recording correct? And diseases, are they recorded as per the standard case definition? So that is the records which you yourself have to know, of course. The diseases as per standard case definition, how are they going to be recorded? ICD, how are you going to use it? Then we can also see the outcome of services. See, the disease trends take a long time to come. But immunization coverage you can see. And based on that coverage, you can know that whether your services outcome is okay or not. Community participation, you're going to sense. When you go to a community and you are given assistance, they give you space, like in our case, in the rural area, we have been provided space by the panchayat. They are very happy with your services. They're likely to be very friendly and all that. So that community participation is essential. Unless community participation is there, so you have to assess it. So that is what has to be supervised. Now, supposing you are in a remote underutilized district. There were 102. I haven't checked the latest, but as I told you, the population, unless they're sensitized to actually what is the service available, because if I don't know what is the service available, how will I use it? So they have to be sensitized to whatever service is available in the under RCH, and for that these camps are very useful. So there was some fund also given to them. 10 PHCs per district, they were supposed to have RCH camps for sensitization of the population. 12 lakh per district per annum was sanctioned. Camps were held once in 2 months, with 20,000 being given for each camp. 6 camps per year per PHC were held. And the team for the RCH camp was the medical college. Our college also held these, and district hospital or FRU, first referral unit. Members, because you are sensitizing for all services which are available, and you have to recall your lectures to see what are the services available. Gynae, pediatrics, anesthesia for MTPs, medical officer, staff nurse, lab technician for all the lab tests, LHV, the lady health visitor, the health assistant, theatre assistant, A&M sweeper, services, all the services which have been covered under. So MTP, the STD services, IUD insertions, RTI, STIs, gynecological problems, ANC, PNC, counseling, safe delivery, manage the newborn, immunization, lab services, all these will be covered in this. You have to sensitize the population for this. So now with the first step which we said was action plan for community need assessment and work plan as per activities. So you had a rough action plan in mind, and that was to prepare a program. Now that you've gathered all this data, now go to that action plan and now see what are those points which you need to actually cover. That action plan is what action needs to be taken. For instance, for immunization, what is the action that you need to take? To complete 80%, to complete 100%, for like in our college, we set up 2 sites that we are going to have this much of a crowd. We had a plan that we are going to have immunization for COVID in the NEMC campus. But when we realized this many people would be there, so what did we do? We set up 2 sites. And work plan is as per activities, because work plan is something, what is the work which you're going to do every day? So whatever activity is ultimately going to be held. Now, supposing you are preparing for an exam. So you do schedule, don't you, that today I'm going to study this much, tomorrow I'm going to, attend this lecture or whatever. So that is the work plan. And work plan is to be pasted on the sub-center door. Why? Because the MOPHC should scrutinize the monthly calendar of sub-centers, that is effective supervision and supportive supervision. If it is on the door, now this is a work plan, which is just a hypothetical one. If you notice, in this Wednesday is the immunization day in all sub-centers, and you need home visits. So I've just put them up. Like Tuesday in our centers, we have family planning services. So I put up family planning services here. And if you notice, this is the sample monthly sub-center plan. It's the work plan. It's just pasted on the door. So if the medical officer comes for a visit and it's a Thursday and it's a second week, he will find the worker in doing immunization in village 4. So that way effective supervision can happen, and there can be an element of surprise in it. So to summarize, there are about 50 comprehensive RCH services to be effectively carried out for the entire population, and these are the services. I'm not going to read them all out, but these are the services which, management of childhood diseases, MCH services, nutritional services. Rest of them may be, referral services, of course. These may not actually happen, but they are listed under these services. At a PHC, you may not see the fertility services except for contraception. Educational services may not be there, control services, health education regarding gender issues. So all these are comprehensive health services which can be effectively carried out. So the sub-center action plan would be serving the population. These are just points which have been now put together. Estimate number of eligible beneficiaries. So we've started from the center plan, and now we're going to the sub-center action plan. Number of infants, number of live births, number less than 5 years. If you just see, it is all basically a repetition of what we've done earlier, what we've just seen earlier. Antenatal registration, high-risk pregnancies, anemic pregnant women, high-risk newborns, all these numbers you have to estimate. Then the vaccine requirement calculation. You need population of the area, you need the birth rate, and you need the IMR. These questions are sometimes asked in your MCQs or in the Vivas. So you need to know. Number of beneficiaries, we've just seen in the second slide, the number of beneficiaries, number of doses of each vaccine, and the wastage and multiplication factor, and number of sessions that you're going to hold. Accordingly, you will ask for vaccines. These calculations, the probable number of pregnancies, as I told you, population of the area into birth rate, right? So antenatal registration is probable number of pregnancies plus 10% for pregnancy wastage. So this is generally a very common question in your Viva.
Yeah. Wrong slide. Yeah,
wrong slide?
Yeah, wrong PPT. This is not the edited one.
Okay, this is a. Okay.
So this is the earlier one.
Okay. So number of pregnant women. This is actually a very common question. That how will you assess in an area how many pregnant women? And now I think the PARC also gives this formula. Earlier it was not there. So you just know the population and you multiply it by the birth rate. So supposing it's 30 per 1,000, that hypothetical example which I took. So if it is 30, the number of pregnant women should be about 30, but then it is not going to be all 30 at the same time, isn't it? So that is why, because they will not come till 16 weeks or 12 weeks of gestation to even record, and then there will be some pregnancy wastage. So you will not see all 30 registered, right? It will be 2/3 of them who will be registered. That's okay. We'll just give them a rough, brief idea. Number of infants, I don't know how many are listening also. Population into birth rate. So annual vaccine requirements, see, number of eligible, these are just formulas into number of doses into proposed coverage, multiplication factor, which is based on vaccine. But basically what happens is that this wastage factor also keeps changing and the multiplication factor also keeps changing. Earlier we used to say open the vial only when there are 10 people present, then it changed. So these calculations, you can just see them. They're asked in small exercises and all, but not really a part of the mainstream lecture. So like if you're wanting to calculate the any number of tablets of iron required for the pregnant mothers, you have to estimate how many expected to be anemic, right? For children, how many deworming and also these are all the calculations which are there. Not very important from the theoretical point of view, as I told you, but small exercises which come in epidemiology and whatever is asked in vivas does take care of this. So that is the time when you really have to remember all this. So I think in the epidemiology exercises when we do have certain exercises on this also. So they will be repeated. So in any case, you can't remember all this from the lecture. But what you need to really remember from the lecture is that planning of a RCH program is an activity which is again requires you to do a situational analysis, do a recce of your resources, look at the program, that what are you going to trying to deliver, and that package of services, how best can it be delivered. For instance, immunization, you need to have sessions in the sub-center, sessions in the PHC, and you also need to have catch-up round, need to have home visits, because universal coverage is our objective. So we want to immunize every child. Same thing for pregnant women. So all those services which have been taught to you as package of services, you will need to ensure that that package of services is delivered, and that package of services, how best it can be delivered. But that is not where it ends. You also have to see that every person knows his or her task. For that, the training status is very important, and you have to actually ensure that everybody is trained in their task. And over and above all this, the medical officer has to go in for supportive supervision. Supportive supervision is when they actually assess whatever is wrong and train the worker to overcome these wrongs and give better results. So that is how the entire RCH planning works. Does anybody have any question which you want to ask? Because I think for 10 minutes we always leave in the end for 4, but we have time. So if there is anything, no, there is no question. I hope people did hear what was being said. It's 122 attendees, and how many students are there in this class? 250. So out of that, 122 are attending. That's fine. Okay. So maybe next time we'll have an exercise on this in the planning class. Yeah. So in the planning lecture when I take, I think we'll give a small exercise on this also. But if they're not going to answer, it's not going to help much. So if you have no questions, I'll obviously sign off. Thanks for attending, the 122 who did attend. Okay, thanks. I think we can log out.